This is episode number 448 of the Health and Fitness Podcast, brought to you by InnerFight in association with Smith Street Paleo. Dr. Ramzy Ross.
That was a phenomenal introduction.
Hey, there it goes.
That was brilliant.
You can be formal sometimes.
You've done this a few times, I think.
Mate, 442, it's quite special. Mate, give us a little bit of background. We like to start at the start. I know that you've got a funny accent, but tell people where
I was going to say the same about you, by the way. You've got a bit of an English, Aussie.
I know.
I thought a bit of Scottish tinge in there as well.
Mate, I don't have any Scottish.
I think you've got to check your family history there, mate.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mate, sometimes I get, are you South African? And nothing against any of the South Africans that listen to the show. I appreciate all of you guys listening, but I'm definitely not South African. Mate, give us your background. Let's go.
Yeah, look, so a bit of a mixed background, but from a technical standpoint, I'm a physiologist by training. Interested in clinical physiology, interested in performance or exercise physiology, but on the grander scheme of things, looking at human performance, human health and performance, and what science and medicine can do for us in terms of getting people healthier and taking performance to the next level for those level of... Is
that something that you've always been interested in? Is that something you were interested in at school? Give us a bit of... Were you a complete
story is
geek?
No, I wasn't. That's the funny thing. And I guess a similar story to others that go into this field. I mean, I'm a passionate sports person, played football. I think it is still the most popular sport, and I was a sucker. I still am a bit of a sucker for it. I still enjoy it.
Who's going to win the World Cup?
I think it'll be. I'm going to go with France here. If not the home nation, Russia.
After last night, Russia beating Spain on penalties.
Exactly. I think they could do it.
Yeah,
I think they could do it, but I'd like to see France do it personally.
Well, by the time this show goes live, everyone will know that, but that's okay. So you're into football at a young age, and played at a decent level, university level back in the UK, etc. Yeah. But same story as I think many others. It wasn't quite good enough. Yeah,
and had to find another way to stay in sport.
Yeah,
and literally the whole area of sports science, physiology, and it was up and coming back at universities, particularly in Europe, Europe, US, Australia, etc. Becoming more popular.
Yeah,
and it looked like an avenue to keep my hand in sport and maybe go down the science medical route of it all, and that's exactly what I did. And referring to your geeky comment, it really was. I ended up doing a PhD in it and so on, and that really wasn't part of the plan at all. That came out of nowhere. But I remember phoning my dad saying to him, "Look, this opportunity's come up. I don't really know what to do with it." And he says, "Well, just go for it, see what happens."
Really?
And that was it. Took it, and alongside that, obviously PhD is quite an academic thing to do.
Yeah,
but the let's say the version I did was very applied. I mean, I was out in East Africa working with endurance athletes.
Wow.
So it was getting my hands dirty. I think it was what kept me interested.
That's what I was going to ask you, mate. Yeah. What sort of, obviously, we all played sport and you're interested, but what made you interested about essentially how performance works, how the human body, what was it?
I think the key thing that got me interested, and the University of Glasgow was a key factor in this. It was understanding, performance limitations. Actually, why do we tire? So why do we fatigue? What stops us from being able to achieve goals? Not just from a psychological standpoint, but primarily from a physiological standpoint, from a biomechanical, standpoint. Why hasn't a human being run a sub-2 marathon to date? What is it? What are the limiting factors that are stopping the human being from being able to achieve that? And so, as opposed to initially looking at and helping people enhance performance, is looking at why can't certain people achieve, or human beings achieve certain levels of performance, and then using that information and understanding, if this is a limiting factor, or this is a limiting factor, this is a limiting factor, and there are obviously multifaceted points to why people don't achieve.
I'm going to ask you what they are.
Look, there's going to be physical components. I mean, your heart, your lungs, your might be biomechanical components.
Yeah.
There might be psychological components that would stop somebody or inhibit somebody from achieving their goals.
Yeah.
So understanding what all those limitations are, I think, then pushed me towards and saying, if we know what the limitations are, what can we do about them in terms of overcoming them in order to help somebody, particularly in the elite in the elite world, to help them, whether it's achieve a world record or PB or whatever. So that's what fascinated me, and as I got deeper and deeper into it, it's just fascinating. I mean, in terms of, and also alongside that, I did a lot of work with some groundbreaking work that was new at the time, and for example, part of my PhD was involved on a performing enhancing drug that's quite well known. The Armstrong case, the EPO.
I was going to say, are you involved in Chris Froome's case?
No.
Not sure we should talk about that, but given that yesterday the French banned him from riding in the Tour de France, it could be quite interesting. We could get to performance enhancing drugs later.
No, look, let me put it in context for you. So it was research focused. It was partly sponsored by the World Anti-Doping Agency.
Really?
So I'll put that in, and it was to look at genetic screening techniques for detecting EPO use.
Yeah.
So it was part of the whole drug detection kind of initiative.
You must know a lot of things.
What fascinated me on that front was okay, yes, it's interesting to develop new techniques, especially when you're looking at genes, etc., and how you could potentially look at substance use. But at the same time, it's well established that EPO does enhance performance.
Yes.
And I was also curious to understand, well, how does that work? I mean, they're the obvious. People understand it.
For those, mate, how does EPO work? Because we see it a lot. Everyone knows Lance Armstrong, drugs, and then this word EPO. I don't think many people even know what it stands for. So give us a quick insight into how it actually works.
So it stands for human recombinant erythropoietin, and it's essentially a drug that stimulates red blood cell stimulation creation, let's say, in your bone marrow, inside your bones. So, and what that does is it creates new red blood cells, and red blood cells are important for carrying oxygen. Obviously, the what keeps you alive right now and us having this conversation. So the idea being that if you increase your red blood cell mass, you improve oxygen carrying capacity, then you can improve performance markers like. You probably have heard this word thrown around in the performance world a lot, probably oversold on too many occasions, this whole VO2 max idea.
VO2 max,
VO2 meaning rate of oxygen, so if you can increase that, which you can do through training, which you can do through weight management, which you can do through other means, but obviously EPO, given the nature of what it does, would directly affect, for example, a parameter like that,
right?
And which could be linked to performance enhancement effect. So that's kind of the common known, on the street kind of thing of what EPO does. But I think there's a lot more, and we know there's a lot more to what EPO can do than just that alone.
Right.
And that was an area that we were looking at assessing, and seeing what we could learn from that, and then apply it in a legal context. So if you find, because being very clear, I'm not going to start suggesting people start, But one of the things we found, which you may find interesting, was it was very popular. I mean, it got published in the American College of Sports Medicine. It was an editor's pick for that year, because it provided a lot of insight well beyond what people thought was happening when you inject a drug like this.
I think that's one of the biggest things, isn't it? Because, like I said, everyone knows Lance Armstrong, EPO. They put this drug in, it makes you go faster. But there is a wider context, right?
Absolutely. I mean, so for example, one thing I picked up during that trial, and it was a very intensive trial. You can imagine you're using a controlled substance, getting approvals through, getting, it was very intense, and then getting recruits who were going to represent your population base. So you need athletes. You couldn't attract competing athletes to test this because they're competing. There's a conflict there. So you wanted to get recently retired athletes, ex-GB vest holders. We managed to get a few in.
Wow.
The whole ethical side was a complex thing, So, but we got it through, and one thing that we picked up. It was a 12-week protocol. There was a 2-week introduction. There was a 4-week injection phase. There was a 4-week washout. It was very intensive, very intrusive. Clients had to come in regularly. All the medical background, checks, the constant, oversight to make sure obviously nothing adverse happens. If you mismanage the drug, you can suffer a stroke or a clot, that you could die. So we had to be very careful on all fronts. And one thing I found, what really intrigued me, was the effect of the whole process, even before we had given them a substance. The whole idea that we have conditioned them in that they're coming to 18th century, old, Harry Potter style university. you know what I'm saying? White lab coats and with needles involved, and you're seeing the drug being made, and you're self-injecting this. We did that on purpose under your skin and your stomach. So all these little things, we noticed that hold on, this is all having an effect on this person. Yeah. So what do all these points, could they influence a person's performance in the end? Right. So cutting the story short, what we did was we did a placebo arm of it, right? So we told people that basically we will give you a new substance which mimics EPO. Yeah. A new substance. It was fake, effectively. Yeah. And it had a much faster actioning time mechanism. Over 5 days. We want to look at performances pre and post, essentially. Yeah. And it was a very strongly created research study, what we call a randomized controlled trial. So it could really stand up to any scientific scrutiny. And we basically found that injecting basically less than 0.5 of a milliliter of saline, which is basically water and a bit of salt, enhanced performance. So the idea that you're injecting something that you've built up to the person as being this is some phenomenal drug similar to EPO. It's going to do this and this and that and that, and it's kind of priming psychological or psychological priming or conditioning cause and effect. So we already know from this study that actually taking EPO, a percentage of that effect is not due to the actioning of the drug. Right. It's other mechanisms that you're influencing along that journey. That's interesting. So you can see where the conversations can go, and then it raised a whole it opened up a whole new area of discussion in relation to.
So what if you take your sample, some of them were just taking saline, others were taking EPO. What was the increase in performance? Do you have any figures like?
Yeah, look, EPO. Yeah, absolutely. If EPO can, and this is published data, so there are published data. You can look at the study; it's available online. Anything from 5, I've seen studies from 5 to about 12% improvements. Right. In endurance focused, particularly endurance focused events. Anything from 3K, 10K, cycling, running, and up type events. So they are major gains. I mean, you're a fit man yourself. I'm sure you have an idea in terms of what performance gains you can achieve through training, diet, and whatever absolutely else. Over a 4-week, 8-week, block. So it's pretty staggering in terms of what it can do. But look, it's because I want to be very clear here. I'm not pushing substance use in any way. It comes with serious risk, and it's something that everybody should be very 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 careful with. But no, absolutely. From a placebo perspective, though, we didn't find the same degree of performance impact effect, but it was still significant enough to give you this example. For example. We looked at all events across male and female events from the 3K distance. Actually, 1500 I think it was the shortest distance we looked at, all the way up to 10K distances. Right. And in Olympic finals, right, all the way back from Athens to London, right. This is insane. And we looked at saying, right, if we did our placebo intervention with all those finalists in those races across both genders, across all those distances. What could have been the outcome? And we found that in fact the athletes that finished 10th, 12th, I think it was up to 12th position, could have actually won the race. Because the marginal difference between finishing 1st, 5th, 10th, in these races is 1% and less. So in the grand population scheme of things, people are arguing, well, what's 0.3% or 0.5% or 1%? But actually, if you look at the elite scheme of things, it's huge. And we did nothing in reality. From terms of giving somebody an active ingredient, we did nothing. But then I would also argue back in saying, coaches, and I'm sure you do this yourself, and I think good coaches do this regularly. There's things called like the Hawthorne effect, where you see this with athletes all the time. If the coach is within the room or within the vicinity, and the athlete's doing some drills, and they know that coach is popping in, or the coach may be popping in the next 5 minutes, I better get my technique right, my disciplines. But if they're not here, I'll do the same thing, but I'll be a little bit more slack.
Yeah.
So all these little effects can affect somebody's ability to perform.
So what we need to do is we need to get a false doping ring set up for people who want to perform at the highest level, but not tell them about it, and get these white lab coats and this 18th century.
I tell you what, no jokes aside, mate. I wouldn't be surprised if you get very similar effects.
Mate, let's dig into a little bit of that, because
sure.
I love the mental side of it. Obviously, love the physical side. Absolutely, I hate doping. I hate drugs, and I'll be a little bit upset, but not surprised if Chris Froome actually comes out and is guilty. I mean, he's doing incredible things. But let's talk about the mental side. What do you think it is that stimulates that increase in performance?
Good question. I think there are two key things that I often talk about if you're trying to get more out of your athlete. Now, this applies to your general Joe who's looking to optimize his or her body composition, to somebody again who's looking at that more marginal gain, over a particular event.
Yeah.
And I think the two things that need to be focused on, it's one is trying to manipulate someone's perception of effort.
Right.
Yeah. So their perception of how hard they're working, and the second thing is what I call potential motivation. Right. What can you do to increase the motivation of that individual to achieve more?
Right.
So, I mean, again, good coaches do this all the time. I mean, there are instances where I've myself with clients have maybe given them biofeedback that's maybe not been so accurate.
Yeah.
For the purposes of getting them to do more or lift more or stay at a certain intensity a bit longer.
Yeah.
You're reporting, you're maybe under-reporting something where in fact they're working harder than they think they're working. Sorry, it's easier. You're reporting something that's easier than what they're actually doing.
Yes.
And then you find they're doing it.
Yeah.
So that's you're manipulating or playing with someone's perceived level of effort. So if you can find novel ways to do that, you'll be surprised how much more your client can push, and I guess it links in closely with your brand here. InnerFight. How do you use potential motivation, perception of effort? How do you manipulate that to kind of get that inner fight out?
Yeah, I think that's one of the key things as well, and I think sometimes the more we know, the more dangerous it is, and the less we know. Like we sit a lot with people, like for example, if it's a 1 rep max back squat. And we just keep putting weight on the bar, and the client's like, "How much is on here? Don't worry about it. Just lift it."
Absolutely.
And then we tell them, it's like, "But what do you think? What is it, or do you know? What is it in the brain that if I knew that it was 100 kilos and I've never lifted 100 kilos before, what happens in my brain that starts to make me think this? I've never been here before, and I start to get scared. Whereas when I don't know, when you've just put that weight on." I can lift 100 kilos. Okay, it'll take a bit of effort, but I can do it. What's going on upstairs?
I think there are two things. I think there are several things actually, but I think two key components are there is a chemistry side to it in the sense that there are hormones that of which concentrations could get released or not released in certain quantities based on how your anxiety, for example, things like dopamine, for example. Yeah. And then there's a psychological component of related to things like anxiety, related to things like taking on something that you haven't done before. People respond to it differently. Yeah. And I think personality profiling, this is something I'm also interested in, is very interesting, because I think approaches will often depend. Approaches and their outcomes will often depend on the personality of an individual as well. Yeah. So some people do like to know exactly what they're doing, and they feed off it, and they benefit from it. Whereas, as you say, sometimes you just get on with it, and you're loose with kind of your biofeedback, and they just get on with it and they do much better. So I think you've got to profile the person very carefully and then tailor your approach accordingly. But in terms of the physiology or the chemistry, I think there's certainly a chemical component that can influence someone's motivation again to push it a little bit harder. But I think it's still quite an unknown
Yeah, is it? That's what I was going to ask next. Is it? Are we still in a? I mean, I guess like 10 or 15 years ago, if you're a sports scientist talking about we wouldn't be having this conversation now.
Yeah.
It'd be quite different. We've come a long way, and we've got access to a load of different things, but it's quite funny because we've got access to all this technology, and we're stood here talking about just not telling the client how much weight's on the bar. It's like the most basic approach.
I like just on that. I think simplicity is always the way. Regardless, look, you need to have science, you need to have research, you need to have answers, you need to, and certain techniques will only apply to certain levels. I mean, but at the end of the day, even when you're dealing with top clubs in the world and top, whether it's football teams or whether it's whatever sport you're looking at, the root of it comes down to simplicity as well.
Yeah.
And I think the key differentiating factors will often be people.
Yeah.
How the common things like how you communicate with your athlete, how you manage your athlete.
Yeah.
And yes, as practitioners, and I say this a lot in career talks and for example, there's one thing being a fantastic academic or a fantastic scientist or a fantastic doctor or a fantastic whatever in the realm of sport, and there's another thing, getting the results you want with an athlete.
Yes.
And you can be a fantastic scientist, best in your field, sports scientist, let's say.
Yeah.
But if you cannot find ways to get what you know from research and science and apply it in every day and apply it to your athlete on the ground, you're useless. Yeah. And I'll go as far as to say that. So they're often the people that excel the most are the ones that have a good scientific background, that are aware of techniques and whatever else, but have very strong interpersonal skills and are able to work with athletes and get things done often in a diplomatic way, as working with health and fitness is especially in the elite segment is very challenging. So it's a lot of other characteristics that people I think don't talk enough about. In terms of getting stuff done and getting the best from your clients, both from an elite perspective, but also helping that person lose a bit of weight and reduce their cardiovascular disease risk or whatever you're looking at.
I think that's super important, mate. Let's flip it onto the side more of the athlete, of the client. We got a lot of people that listen that are perhaps want to get better in their sport, be it if they're coming to the gym doing CrossFit or doing endurance. What things do you think that population are missing? Coaches, scientists, whatever, we've got to deliver. We've got to deliver on a scientific level. Yes, we've got to deliver on an interpersonal level. But what are people missing as athletes or as people just the general population that want to get better?
That's a massive question there.
It's huge.
I mean, you mean in a general context, you're saying...
Yeah, what do you see, mate? You obviously work, and we'll dig into this a little bit, but you work with sort of elite-level athletes, and what do you see? Like, are they coming underprepared in a certain way? Is their mindset not in a certain way? Are they not giving enough attention? What's the trends that you're seeing where people are not reaching their potential? That even the best scientist, the best sports scientist, the biggest motivator in the world, if that client or that athlete doesn't get these things in place...
Look, I think the way our working, for the majority of people, the way our working lives are going in recent years, it's becoming more and more intrusive. Especially those working in corporate entities. It's becoming more intrusive, more time consuming. Pressures are higher. You're having to spend longer hours in seated positions and where you're inactive and this is a major problem. I mean, and that's why I think a lot of companies now, I'd say the big companies of this world like Google and so on are trying to find novel initiatives to try and keep staff, who are in theory desk-bound type jobs to keep them moving, keep them active, whilst being at work. So this is unfortunately, and I mean unfortunately, the way our world is going at the moment, and lifestyle considerations in the sense of health and well-being is often put on the on the back burner by corporates. So in terms of fundamentals, I think it still boils down to the same stuff. I mean, eating well, keeping physically fit, at least trying to stick to some form. A lot of government have guidelines. They're very simple guidelines, but I think if you can still hit them, And I'm not slating them by any means.
No.
I mean, if you can still achieve your 30 minutes most days of the week, or, that's better than nothing. But food, exercise, and work balance, I think, is the biggest inhibitor. And I don't know what you see, but for what I see, work is often the biggest, let's say, limiting factor.
I think as well. I think. And let's not destroy the corporate world, but I think it is demanding that, but it's almost demanding. I don't actually believe that people are working harder than they've ever worked. I just think the amount of hours and the laws that we're having to work within, like, you must be here at this time, you must do this, you must do that.
Absolutely agree.
That's what's causing the issue. I don't think our productivity is not massively more. People still work for 8 hours a day.
I guess I should clarify. No, when I say working, the working ethos that's been developed now, I agree completely. I think productivity in many cases has gone down.
It's gone down.
Whereas people are ticking boxes to say that I've been in the office between this hour and this hour, therefore I'm working. Absolutely. I think if you give more freedom and more flexibility to your staff members, obviously within a trusted, with a framework.
I think that's where it's difficult for companies as well. I think what Virgin, one of Branson's Virgin companies, did unlimited leave, and which kind of I really don't know how that goes, but I think, and I was having an interesting conversation with a friend the other day about sort of an intensity factor at work, like how much of your work life, if you take an intensity scale of like 1 being 0, doing nothing, and 10 just being absolutely all in on a task. If you could plot your tasks that you do at work, where would you be on that scale? So you take 10 of your tasks that you do on a week, like where do you do them? How many of those tasks do you do at like between 8 and above? Like probably very few. And it's quite a lot and that's where we came back to it. We came back to it as sort of like heart rate training. And that grey zone, we're like either threshold or zone 2, and don't play around here. But we actually, when we were fixing the world that day, we were like, we reckon most people in the corporate world, our effort level in their work is between 4 to 7 for most tasks, but they're there for hours and hours on end, and that's what's in the end. What you're saying, what I agree with, is that it becomes detrimental to health, because in that work environment we're sitting down. In that work environment, there's probably a birthday every day where there's a cake coming around, and there's all sorts of sort of negative aspects within that environment, and they're surrounded by a load of other people who are only performing at effort level 4 to 7 as well. So they're not overly inspirational, and they're not intense, and they're not all in. It's
a spiral that you can't really break out of. And by the way, not to harp on too much about research, but this is. I mean, there are people who study this, and there's people who published on this regularly. In that, the most widely reported limitations of general population, people getting to meet country guidelines or government guidelines, or just getting physically active, is often lack of time. Is often that's most often reported. And in fact, if we go back to the context of high intensity training and where HIIT training has evolved from, was part of it was due to that point. So academic scientists looked and said, well, most people are struggling to get fit because they're saying that they don't have time. So then academics looked into saying, well, if time's an issue, what's the benefits of doing high intensity, short duration, and let's see if we can overcome this by and this is where the HIIT then blew up and still being
and it works.
And it works. So for me, I think everybody understands that food and activity are the key pillars of health and well-being and fitness. I don't think there's anybody on this planet that would but and it's probably boring for me to be repeating the same too, but I think there are the way our work life in general is evolving. It's becoming increasingly challenging. Although I do see, as you've mentioned, there are your bigger corporations out there that are trying to come up with novel ways to try and counteract this. And I think a trend. I think there's a trend building. I don't think there's enough there yet, but hopefully this will. I
think Well, I shouldn't call it a dick swinging contest, but I will do. But I think sometimes, which in this case it's quite good, and I liken it to sort of sustainability initiatives that corporates have. It's like, okay, they're our competitor and they've got this big sustainability. It's like if you look at Adidas and Nike and the sweat houses that they use, and sort of that, because that's where the background that I came from. It's like, okay, once Nike had done it, then Adidas had to do something about the poor labor conditions, and I think it's quite similar. Like, you mentioned Google. Google now have an employee wellness program. So if Google's doing it, well, everyone else should do it. So it's kind of quite a nice spiral, and it's like, well, we've got the best one, so employees should, people should want to come and work for us. It is quite interesting. Mate, let's jump into sort of what you do. You're based here in Dubai. Talk to us about what you work on, what you work in. You're obviously a super knowledgeable guy. No. Tell us a little bit about that.
So multiple. I mean, in the UAE, I've had the fortunate opportunity to work on a variety of projects as a consultant, mostly, including working with the military, and a big focus with the military here in the UAE Armed Forces was looking at the national service for the UAE nationals. And that was very, very, very interesting for about a couple of years, looking at that and setting up holistic centres across the UAE to provide scientific, medical services, let's say, to cadets on camps, etc. So as part of this big national service drive that I'm sure you're aware of, and you might have had a few.
We've had a load of them, mate.
Yeah, I'm sure you have. So that without its challenges, for sure. By the way,
I was going to say we could probably do a whole other
segment on that.
Probably wouldn't be politically correct, but on national service of the UAE. But I think on that, mate, I think it's something that is super proactive for the country, making sort of the youth go into military service, but I'm sure that
fantastic. Fantastic initiative. I think it's a fantastic opportunity, and still is a fantastic opportunity to not only educate the local group of Emiratis, on nutritional interventions, educate. There's a whole range. It's not just going into military and marching around in boots for whatever. Right. There's a whole wider aspect that we looked at developing from educating in terms of how to eat, exercise, etc. Awesome. So it's a fantastic initiative that is growing, that is regularly improving year in, year out. And so that was a very, very unique opportunity, which provided a lot of insights. And then a variety of projects working with healthcare companies, smaller, bigger, to facilities not quite as unique as yours here in InnerFight, mate, but different kinds of gyms, healthcare facilities, and more recently on a big clinical facility on the Palm, first of its kind for the region, integrating, let's say, sports medicine, orthopedics with a performance laboratory as well.
This is huge, mate. This project that you've just sort of said, a bigger project on the Palm, like it's just something that you just walk into every day. What you guys have been, or what you're involved in, and what's been built on the Palm is somehow, I maybe would go a bit far if I called it revolutionary, but for Dubai, it is quite revolutionary. There's all sorts of different technology there, testings, and it's attracting people all over the world. Tell us more about it. Come on, sell it to us, mate.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So it's a large facility, 17,000 square foot. It's a clinical facility, so it's all DHA licensed, etc. But within that, there's a performance, let's say, a performance laboratory.
Yes.
With several pieces of high tech equipment, not just for the sporting population, but for I would say anybody that's looking to become physically active, or who is physically active. And when I say physically active, I think anybody that's doing regular walks, jogs, runs, whatever it may be that keeps you burning some calories. Yeah. It was primarily set up to cater to the elite sports person, not just within the region, but attracting sports persons from across the globe, who may be passing by, who may be here for other purposes. To get, for example, one segment we're looking at is the football medical.
Right.
So, as you know, if a player moves from X club to X club, there's a set of processes in place that you have to go through in order for that transfer to be essentially to have a chance of going through. As part of that, there's a medical, and I had a piece on this, by the way, a small plug. No, not really. But there was a piece on this talking about the football medical in the Independent at the start of this year, during the winter transfer season for the football market, and we just shed some insights into what goes on behind what's the purpose of football medical, how does it work, why is it done. I'll send you the link. You can have a read. And that's a segment that we're looking at for that facility. Again, the idea is that you can come in and get a full body assessment done. So it's your eyes checked, your ears checked, your breathing checked, your heart checked, any musculoskeletal issues, to biomechanical assessments, to how your nerves fire. We can look at in action. So if you're doing a jumping movement, a running movement, a jogging movement, a walking, whatever it may be, we can assess it in real time. I think that's the key thing as well. It's functional.
That's very cool. And there's nothing like that here in the UAE, really, is there?
In the UAE, no, absolutely not. In the UAE, certainly not. So it does provide unique offerings. And again, that football transfer market is a very interesting market for the UAE, because the UAE isn't known necessarily for a place of where you get that type of medical done. So we're working hard to achieve that goal and start attracting high-end athletes, not just in the world of football, but obviously that's for obvious reasons, that's an area where we're starting first. It's a rich sport. It's an area where the medical is pivotal to somebody signing.
What can we talk a little bit about the medical, mate? What would a player, because I think this is interesting for a lot of people, football is in everyone's face. What sort of testing does a player, if Liverpool want to buy a player from Man United?
Do you know something we don't? Is there a player moving or what? Okay.
What is the test? What do they go through? I know nothing about football, mate. So
it involves no.
It's around this ball. There's a lot of falling over.
You throw it to each other.
Talk to us about the medical, because I think this is something that a lot of people probably wouldn't know about.
A football medical, what's always done typically in a football medical is you'll typically get your knees assessed, right? ACLs, PCLs, cruciate injuries and all. That's fairly common. So you typically get your knees assessed. You'll typically get your heart assessed for any potential congenital heart-related issues, which, God forbid, you probably heard the case of Mwamba and others over the years of sudden cardiac arrest and death on pitches, etc. So that's a very interesting area in terms of pre-screening, and not just in football, by the way. I mean, that's a conversation we can have down the line. To reduce your risk of something like that. So getting your heart checked, your knees checked, a general physical exam to check your overall health, a blood test, urine test. There may be an anti-doping element to it as well, and if there's a player that's known to have had an ongoing injury or problem with an injury, then that purchasing club will more than likely, almost certainly, be interested in assessing that particular area in more detail. Right. So, there are many examples. One of the last ones I was asked to comment on in the Independent again was looking at Gareth Bale. He was having recurrent calf injuries. I think it was his right calf. I see so many reports, I get confused with people's limbs. But he was having ongoing recurrent. It wasn't a major issue, but it was an issue that put him on the bench. Right. So, for example, if you're a club that were looking to purchase Gareth Bale, then you'll do a general screen, covering those areas I told you about. Yeah. But then you may look at and say, well, look, he's had pending issues, over the last months. Let's look at that a bit more closely and get an opinion on it. Yeah. And the verdict, obviously, of that report will then ultimately tell you whether you want to purchase or not purchase, or you still want to purchase, but there may be some terms you can negotiate. You can
get him a bit cheaper because he's buggered.
I like how blunt you are, mate.
I think that's actually super interesting. That if we bring this back locally, that we're attracting players from Europe to a facility in Dubai to get this testing done, which obviously speaks volume about the level of technology and the level of staffing that you have down there.
Yeah, look, it needs to be. It's the facility where it's on the palm. It markets. It plugs into that bigger PR engine of Dubai. The palm markets. If I tell anybody across the globe that potentially even hasn't even been to the UAE or to Dubai, I say, we're on the palm.
They know.
Oh yeah, I kind of know it. Although they have no idea where it is, but they know it's Dubai, and they know they got it visually in their head. So that's a plus side to it. Of course, the equipment, the facilities, everything, the space, everything is well above industry standard in terms of finishings, etc. But of course, what's pivotal and what's going to continually be pivotal for the place is going to be the personnel as well, and the level of expertise and etc. So, it's definitely leading within the country, and the team there are working hard to achieve those goals and such as that in the world of football,
mate. We've sort of gone full circle, and we've talked about simplicity, we've talked about technology, we had a great talk on drugs and EPO. Now I want to go into your crystal ball. The industry is moving fast. We also spoke about sort of what was happening 15 years ago. You've seen, obviously, technology play a big part. We're also seeing in the UAE things like obesity on the rise, diabetes, which leading to heart disease. We've got all of these issues, and a lot of these issues are global. What's your thoughts on sort of, we'll probably both be in this industry in 10 years' time. Where will we be at, mate? You're a scientist, but you're also pretty streetwise. You're not a complete nerd. What's your thoughts of sort of 10 years down the road? Where are we going to be going to?
It's a big question again. You like your big questions.
I love them.
You've always got to think ahead. Of course, you've got to plan for the future. 10 years down the line, I think it's probably a bit too far for me to gauge. But based on more recent trends, I mean, I'm fascinated by biofeedback in the end. And I'm disappointed, I'll have to say, by the majority. And without naming names, but with a lot of the tools out there, and being frank, but that's not to then tarnish the whole area of biofeedback, as a whole. I think that's going to be a growing area. I think the area of AR, VR is a very interesting one. So virtual reality, augmented reality, how tech companies in the end, working alongside scientists, coaches, fitness professionals, health professionals, how they can merge, gaps in their capabilities to come up with products and hopefully less gimmicky products and more substance-focused products.
That's what I was going to say. We were talking before the show about the new treadmill we've got here, the Techno Gym treadmill, and sort of how it works, how it can be a sled, how it can go uphill, how it can go downhill. Some of that is quite functional, and of course,
Techno Gym, you got to thank Marcus here for the plug.
Well, I'm also gonna give them a backhanded slap that on the screen they have Facebook. And so I'm doing a workout and I'm on Facebook, which I know it's great because I know a lot of people need that carrot that if they've got this big iPad in front of them, it's huge, great screen, but you can get Facebook on it, you can watch YouTube. Like, if I could focus on Facebook or YouTube when I'm doing a proper run, then I'm not doing the run properly. So, there is that gap, isn't there? What I'm saying is it technology for performance, like great things like they've integrated a sled into it, or is it technology to sort of, I don't know, to feed the appetite of constant engagement in things like social media? I think that's something that's going to be quite interesting.
So I'll give you, it's somewhat related to what we're talking about now. There was an article in, I've forgotten the magazine. I've forgotten the magazine, but anyway, I'll dig it out and I'll share it with you and for your readers as well. You might be interested. So there was an experiment done. I think it was in Germany. I can't remember, in Europe somewhere, and they created a dark track. I don't know if you came across this.
Yes,
I posted on it on my social page a while ago. I can't remember, for the life of me, can't remember the details. But basically,
ASICs were involved.
I think it was ASICs. I didn't want to mention the wrong brand.
Yeah,
so
it was ASICS.
Yeah. So where people got no feedback, they couldn't see distances, they couldn't judge finishing lines, they couldn't, and I think that's fascinating.
Yeah.
And it was why I think it's fascinating, because it comes back to those elements we were talking about moments ago.
Yeah.
About by the way, people don't like to there are people out there that don't like to exercise.
Yes.
Because they just don't like the sensation of feeling tired, of feeling, which is a problem.
Yeah.
And we can't criticize them for that.
No.
Because often, it's often not a pleasant feeling.
No.
So how can we overcome that again for people like that who have, let's say, who struggle maybe a bit more with their inner fight.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
To overcome the sensations of this pain and whatever else they may be reporting to you. So the idea of removing finishing lines, and what would the feedback be from somebody exercising? And people were reporting things like, they found it more enjoyable.
Yeah.
They found it easier or more enjoyable. I mean, that's a fantastic result.
Yeah.
If they burnt 500 calories, in more of in an enjoyable environment, that means they're more likely to do it again and again and again, and therefore the knock-on effect.
I think that's something super interesting, and I find that a lot with a lot of clients. That, I mean, we have people come in, and I'm sure it's no different to you. What have you been doing fitness-wise is the question, and they say, I haven't done anything since high school. They're 40 years old. It's like 20 years. It's like, okay, wow. And why? Because of what you said, they actually don't enjoy it. But if you say, okay, can you go for a walk with your wife or your husband just for 20, 30 minutes to the park 3 times a week? Oh, yeah, I can do that. And suddenly we've bridged the gap. We've given them fitness, and we've also given them some great engagement with a loved one, and we're building on that relationship. I think but that also comes back to simplicity, doesn't it?
But I think it always will. I don't think that'll ever change. I think you'll find novel ways of maybe communicating or getting somebody engaged initially.
Yes.
But I think your bottom line will always come back down to something that's fairly straightforward and simple. I mean, the principles of negative energy expenditure over a day. I mean, it's not rocket science, But the avenues of getting somebody to expend more energy than what they consume. There are infinite ways of trying to do that. But it's I think coaches and fitness professionals and so on will have to become more clued up on understanding patient or client profiles and understanding how people tick, how they work, and utilizing these resources to tap into those areas. And
I think it's definitely going to be interesting on that level, like, of basic motivation, how we continue to motivate people to get involved in stuff.
I mean, with VR, AR, and look, I'm sure it'll have its problems, like it already does, but in principle, somebody's at home, goggles on, and they feel immersed, within an environment that they enjoy. It could be, I don't know, like a dodgeball scenario. I was talking about this with somebody else. A virtual dodgeball. Where you're in a enclosed, safe area, and you're throwing and catching and ducking and diving. Against some, in a virtual. For me, it sounds brilliant.
That sounds great.
If a 15-20 minute, half an hour dodgeball session, it's gonna
living room.
It's gonna help you burn an added 3, 4, 5, 6 whatever calories. Go for it. What's the issue? What's the problem? Just like, the example of walking the dog. There's it's such a simple thing, but getting somebody to walk alone. Go for a walk, 30 minutes. Oh, I can't be bothered. Have you got a pet? Yeah, I've got a dog. Yeah, I love my dog. Yeah. Well, why don't you class that as a session? But maybe think about making it a bit more active. Put your training, rather than your walking shoes, put some trainers on. Go for a little jog, do some little interval work or something. Get the dog chasing you, and then all of a sudden, they're interacting with the dog, and they've done an hour session, whereas they're struggling to do a half an hour walk. Now they're doing a mixed, essentially, interval without knowing it. In the park. So I think
where we'll get to.
But the AR VR is a very interesting way. Interesting topic. The biofeedback side, I think, is important, but I think it's often overplayed. And I think people are getting too data crazy, and this is an area I deal with a lot of data. All the time. And data is good, but a lot of people, a lot of entities don't know how to utilize that data. So getting data is often quite easy. But utilizing the data to achieve a goal is where the real work, in my view, comes in. And I think the majority of people struggle with that.
I agree with you, Matt. I think there's a lot of systems out there to get, but then it's like you go for an MRI and you get this massive long report, and you sit in there and you get all this information, and this is that on my knee and that on my knee, and it's like, okay, now what?
Absolutely.
Literally, now what?
Absolutely.
Can any one of you tell me what I should do right now that's going to fix the problem? And everyone just goes blank. It's data overload. Mate, we have to get close to wrapping it up. And to wrap it up, I ask another very deep and open question, so I'll prepare you for this one. No, mate, you've obviously got an incredible amount of experience, and before I go to this, I want to just appreciate that you've taken the time out to share.
I want to thank you for inviting me along.
No, mate, it's been 50 minutes has gone super
Jeez,
fast.
That's flown, mate. Okay.
Yeah, it's a great chat, and mate, we'd love to get you back and
Appreciate it.
in a year and see where things have gone, because I think things are moving. Like you said, 10 years is probably too far. Things are moving too fast.
Yeah.
But mate, so far you've had super incredible amount of experiences. If you could just share one thing that you've learned along the way with the listeners that helps them to live a better life, perform better, if you could narrow it down to one piece of advice, what is it? It's a hard question, don't worry.
One piece of advice?
Yeah.
I think it's been the theme of our whole conversation today, and maybe listeners will be disappointed with my answer, because maybe I'm not as I'm going to flip it on you, by the way, and ask you the same question, but I'll answer your question
first.
It
in a second.
I think a word that's emerged from our conversation all today is simplicity, and I'm sorry for such a straightforward answer, but I think use any gimmick, use any mode of moving, eating better, use any tool that could work for you.
Yeah.
And if you look into why that particular thing works for you, I think you're more than fine. It comes down to very simple factors.
Yeah, I don't think it's complicated.
I think a simple thing is just move, do whatever it is you want to do. And at the end of the day, calorie expenditure involves moving, and I'm not really fussed in terms of what you're doing, But of course, within a reason. Like for example, if you
VR dodgeball, mate, that's what I've got in my mind.
I think we should try and look into that. So we can
set up a VR
a corner over here somewhere, mate. In fact, you got enough space here. Why don't we do actual dodgeball?
We can play real life dodgeball.
You can get rid of this stuff here, mate. Let's get some dodgeball.
Dr. Ramzy Ross,
What about you, mate? Quick question.
My one piece of advice: wake up every morning and be committed to be better every single day. Do so. Just as I love the Sky team, Dave Brailsford, marginal gains. Just do something every day that makes you better. And I think that's been in my life in the last 4 or 5 months since my accident. That's been like I was in a situation where I could hardly move, and so I think a lot of the time people are very focused on very big goals. I'm going to run a marathon. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to lose 50 kilos. Cool. So if you break that 50 kilos down, today you need to lose 100 grams. Are you committed to doing that? And that's where the breakdown is for me. So.
And I completely agree. And you mentioned Brailsford. I mean, he's the big, one of the big proponents of marginal gains. And the idea of achieving small goals along the journey will help collectively achieve the grander goal.
Awesome. Ladies and gentlemen, that has been Dr. Ramzy Ross. Follow him, check him out. He writes for The Independent. He writes for all these magazines. He's a super famous dude.
No,
He's
hardly.
got one of the biggest performance centres in clinics.
Do you want a PR role with me, mate?
Mate. This is my podcast. I can promote anyone I want. But, mate, thank you so much for taking the time. Folks, check him out. Thank you to everyone who's tuned in. And as always, if you do have any questions, drop us a mail, winning@innerfight.com. We'd love to get your feedback. Thank you.